Yeah, so London 2012 Olympics, it's the first time that every nation who is represented is sending a female athlete, and I think it's incredibly important that that's not underestimated. As recently as Atlanta in 1996, there were 26 nations represented that had no female participation. So we've come a very long way in a very short period of time. In London this year at the Olympics, we have females represented in every single sporting discipline. That doesn't mean that they do every single event. So, for example, women don't swim the 1500 metres, they swim 800 metres. But this is the first time that women are able to participate in every sport, including boxing, and that was a very big challenge for the Olympic Commission to get over the line, but there will be female boxing for the first time in London. Interestingly, there are two sports remaining that have only single sex, and they are both female sports, which is rhythmic gymnastics and synchronised swimming. So if anything, it's the men that are now not represented in every sport as opposed to women. With all of the nations now representing with female athletes, what we've seen is a big shift. So as I said, in '96 in Atlanta, we had 26 nations that didn't send women. We now have all of the nations sending women. It's not surprising that the last three nations this year were Qatar, Brunei and Saudi Arabia, which are obviously Muslim states. So culturally and religious reasons have inhibited their abilities to send female athletes. And I think that it's incredibly important for us to note that these states have made this very public and very international expression of females able to participate. That's not necessarily translating to grassroots participation, so that's the next step for those nations. But it really has been an extraordinarily large gesture for those nations to encourage and support their female athletes to participate in these Olympics. So it's a small step, but it's a very significant step. Western nations still aren't 50-50, so if we look at Australia as an excellent example, we had our first female representation in the Olympics in 1912. So we have been doing it for 100 years. It's not a bad track record. We had two female swimmers go to the 1912 Olympics, Fanny Durack and Wilhelmina Wiley, and they medalled. They actually got gold and silver in the 100 metres freestyle. So our women have been attending the Olympics now for 100 years and do incredibly well. The last Olympics, which was Beijing, we had 48% women, so again quite close to 50-50. But interestingly, women came home with 58% of the medals. So when we look at who our medalists have been in the more recent years, our female athletes are the ones that are bringing home the medals, even though they haven't been exactly 50-50. The International Olympic Committee is not just about the Olympic event. It does also have organisations, the Olympic committees in each nation, and it's their role to actively engage with and develop sport in those countries. So in some developing nations about getting sport infrastructure in place, but for example for these three Muslim nations, which is the Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Brunei, these female athletes are this first step in these Olympic committees in those nations developing their female athletes. So although we see this big spectacle of the Olympic Games, which looks very elite and multi-billion-dollar event, it is also, there is a movement behind this which is about being inclusive national representation, and that's where those wildcard effectively places for these female athletes have come to play a part. They're not getting a free ride in, it's bigger than the event itself. I think that for all nations that we will see a continued growth in representation from both genders in our sporting events, particularly at this big mega event international level, so our Olympic Games, our Commonwealth Games. What we do need to be more realistic about though is that that doesn't mean that all of a sudden all of these developing nations and Muslim nations are going to have 50-50 female representation. Because of the cultural and religious aspects of those nations, there isn't significant infrastructure and development for female sport. In fact, in some of these nations there's quite a public grouping that are against female participation. But as I said, these are first steps. So if girls in these countries see these female athletes on the world stage, then that may be the start of a movement to encourage and increase female participation. So from little things, hopefully big things grow.